Hello there YouTube, my name is Chuggy and today I am playing some Battlefield 3, playing some Conquest Domination on scrap metal. And today guys I've got something a little bit different for you. A year ago around now I was playing Close Quarters for the first time on the day of the E3 press conferences where, well, as it happened, Battlefield Premium was released, Close Quarters was released, and well, myself, Tom and Matt, we had a hoot. But anyway, a year on, I thought it'd be quite appropriate to come back to some close quarters action as I give my impressions and discuss E3 this year and what has been shown off by Sony, Microsoft, Ubisoft and EA. Now, what I'll try and do is cover everything best I can. Obviously E3 is still going on, so there's bound to be new and interesting things talked about and rumoured and confirmed or denied as obviously the whole event goes on. But Sony, Microsoft, they are locking horns right now for the next generation of console. To be honest, it's kind of really interesting to look at two very different approaches to the same kind of problem. You have obviously Microsoft on one end going for the entertainment center, the entertainment device, where you've got Sony who are staying very traditionally with a games console for gamers. And it's interesting to see how both machines are being received. Now, let's kick off with the Xbox One and Microsoft conference. What I'll say is that Microsoft, they had a lot to do. Given the initial reveal of the Xbox One, where basically it was 90% television and maybe 5% games, with 5% of, oh look, here's some sports, they had a lot to do to try and show that the Xbox One is a gaming machine alongside everything else. And to be fair, you know, they've put together a pretty nice presentation. They showed off, of course, their key first-party exclusives, you know, likes of Forza 5, which does look really very pretty indeed, with some interesting technology. They call it the Drivitar, I think, where basically they're using some processing off in the cloud to understand your driving style. And well, I don't know if the idea is if it drops in for you, like if you go and pause or something and it drives the car for you, or if you race against sort of a perfect kind of mimic or inverse of your driving style to make it more challenging. I don't know, but they showed off the likes of that. They've announced a new Halo game. They showed off Titanfall, which is Respawn Entertainment's, otherwise known as Infinity Ward, after they left their new game for the first time. And I must admit, you know, they did a lot to try and mend the wounds. However, what I will say is that for me it wasn't enough. I don't know, it was just missing, I think, the killer app, or the killer kind of, you know, blow to really get me interested again in the Xbox One. Obviously there's been a lot of hubbub, a lot of discussion about the fact that you've got to be online at least once every 24 hours or else you can't play games, or you won't be able to sell your games, and you know, there's going to be a fee or whatever else involved. And I think that Microsoft did pull a real mistake by not acknowledging that. Not acknowledging that kind of whole, well, I wouldn't say issue, but discussion, and just kind of going on as business as usual. Whereas, well, Sony, they took a bit of a different tack, but I'll get onto that in a moment. So all in all, the Xbox One, they had, I think, a decent showing, but I think they could have done a lot more, a lot perhaps better, but we will have to wait and see. Obviously, you know, it's not the last games conference before the console is due to be released in November. We've got Gamescom and, well, Eurogamer as well before those. But yeah, I think they've done a decent job. I think it could have been better, but you know, in hindsight, these things can be 2020. So that was the first conference, decent showing, and well, the second conference after that was EA, and I must admit, EA for me really stepped it up a notch. Obviously we were expecting some titles like Battlefield 4, and well, I may as well talk about Battlefield 4 at this point. Good God. Now, some alpha screenshots of the game were leaked before the conference, and I must admit I looked at it and I thought, okay, I can see they're going with a slightly different kind of style with user interface and you know, a few other options, you know, and some interesting things like, well, hopefully this remains the case, but the Recon had C4 again. Woohoo! You know, it seemed interesting, but I was also kind of worried because it seemed, well, to me it almost looked like a bit of a reskin of Battlefield 3. Not to say that's a bad thing, but I was perhaps looking for more. But all I'm going to say is, Levolution. Good lord. Okay, it might be a bit of a marketing slogan. Oh look, level, evolution, put the two together, bish bash bosh, we've got some marketing stuff to put on a leaflet. But it really, really, really emphasised itself in the multiplayer gameplay they showed off at the end of EA's conference. They levelled a ruddy skyscraper, and that had a flag on it and everything. You know, that logistically is a playable area, a playable bit of the map, and you know that can really alter the way that the battle could go from that point on. And just the whole way the game kind of played out, you know, the return of Commander, the well, potentially slight changing up of some kits, 64 players on the Xbox One and PS4. Big things, and I am really, really super stoked for Battlefield 4 now. But that wasn't the only thing that EA showed off. They first of all showed off Mirror's Edge 2, It'll Be Coming, which as a massive Mirror's Edge fan, I love that series. I am really very happy about it indeed. On top of that, they also showed off Star Wars Battlefront. It will be produced by DICE, more than likely the DICE LA studio, which has just been set up, but I'm not a Star Wars fan myself, but Star Wars fans I know have gone crazy for that one, so that's all great. But they've also shown off some, you know, new and interesting things, like for example, Plants and Zombies, Garden Warfare. I've never played a Plants and Zombies game before, but that looks like a real hoot. You know, third-person kind of shooter, but for kids. And it just looks like a lot of fun. You know, disco zombies, kind of different classes of plants to try and fend off the waves. I think a really clever idea, and it's a timed exclusive for the Xbox and Xbox One, Xbox 360, Xbox One. But yeah, interesting, and EA, I thought they did a great job, and it really surprised me actually how much I enjoyed their conference and what they showed off. Next up was Ubisoft. Now Ubisoft, I take issue. I think I take issue with their style in terms of their conferences. Now I forget the name of the lady who was presenting, but when she was presenting last year, I got sick and tired of what the kind of false humour and almost really stupidity they were trying to pull at points. And she was back, and there was more of this kind of lark, you know, hashtag girlwood, the deuce. You know, we want to hear about new games, we're not here for humour. If we wanted a laugh, we would play Saints Row, you know. Leave it alone, be a bit serious here, you know, this is what we'll be spending our money on. But having said that, Ubisoft showed off a couple of amazing games, and in particular two which I'm going to highlight, both of which are new IP, both of which took my breath away. First of all is The Crew. The best way I think I could describe this, if you didn't see it, is basically imagine the Fast and the Furious films. The whole of the United States, perhaps not 100% accurate, but the whole of the US, and it's basically kind of like an MMO racing kind of game crew gang experience. Not really sure how to describe it other than that. You know, you're going around, you're trying to infiltrate some gangs, and you do that by grouping together with your friends, getting some cars, modifying them for the job at hand, and you know, racing them or catching and shutting down opponents. Really very interesting indeed, and the car customization goes right down to literally the nuts and bolts of the car. They showed off, you know, going right down to the bottom of the chassis, you know, down into the pistons and changing the engine block and all the rest. Very impressive indeed. So interesting stuff. I believe it's being done by the same group as who did the Test Drive games, until I think they got sacked actually from Atari, but never mind. So yeah, and Reflections, of course, who produced the Driver games, which have always been pretty good. So yeah, I'm impressed by that. But the game out of all of the titles that Ubisoft showed off, which really took my breath away, was The Division. Now this is a new Tom Clancy game, and they kind of frame it with this, you know, there's been a mass pandemic. The whole world has gone to crap, and you are a group of people there to try and turn the situation around for the better. And I must admit, going into it, it was kind of, you know, a 5-10 minute trailer explaining the context that the world has gone to crap. I was like, okay, I get the idea. What is the game you're showing off? And what they showed off was interesting at first, because it was you kind of standard, it was in New York, you know, there were a couple of people with rifles and things like that, and I thought, okay, is this going to be a single player game? Is this, you know, just free roaming around an area, or what's the deal? But as the game progressed, it slowly dawned on me that this was actually multiplayer. The people who were talking to the guy on stage were actual people, and they were going around basically acquiring equipment, scouting out the area to try and gather resources to move on to the next objective, whatever that may be. Now, they came across a police station which was under fire for whatever reason. They go and investigate it, and a load of guys, a load of AI guys, rush them. And you see a really intense couple of minute firefight, and the details, you know, for instance, silly little things like, at one moment, the guy who's playing, he takes cover behind a police car. The door is slightly open. When he brushes by the door, it shuts and locks. Little things like that, you don't realise it, but it adds to the whole kind of scene of it. Individual bullet holes going through glass. At one point there's an AI guy up on a building, he's behind a billboard. A teammate comes along with like a little drone, highlights him, and you know, you shoot him through the billboard and you see little light rays coming through the holes which the gunshots have just created. Really very pretty indeed. And to wrap it all off, they go into this police station, they free some policemen who have been captured, and they give them access to an armory. They find some weapons and some loot, and they go outside to get picked up to move on to the next objective, and PvP kicks off. And it's this massive multiplayer open world experience, it seems. That is ticking a lot of boxes for me. You've got some kind of the cross of third-person shooter, team play, co-op, and of course if you've got PvP and survival, it's kind of almost DayZ-esque in terms of you've got all sorts of, you know, do we risk this? Do we lose our gear? All this kind of stuff. So really very impressive indeed. So Ubisoft I think had a good showing there. I still don't get the way that they present, but hey, maybe that's just me. Now, the final big conference of yesterday, as I'm recording this, was Sony. And, well, given Microsoft and their bit of a predicament in terms of how they presented the Xbox One, they had a lot of momentum, I think it's fair to say. They could really go to town on the Xbox One and, you know, make a lot of potential ground. The only people I think they really had to worry about were themselves in terms of messing it up, potentially. Thankfully, they didn't. Not only did they actually show off the PS4, its new design, they announced the price to, well, $100 cheaper than the Xbox One, as it happens, and they announced a rough release date of this holiday. On top of that, they confirmed no DRM, no need to connect always online. Actually, I'll qualify the no DRM part, it's up to the publishers, as it is with this generation, in terms of, you know, online passes or whatever else. Just my word, they really stuck the knife in and twisted it with Microsoft and the Xbox One and all the political publicity hubbub which broke out after, well, a pretty lackluster showing when Microsoft eventually showed off the console. So they really went to town, they illustrated the points, and that made a lot of people happy. I remember watching the stream and just hearing rapturous applause when they confirmed no DRM, the price, and well, first of all, the release date as well. They seem to really grasp what people were looking for, and I think they made a really good impression with that, which is great. But also, on top of that, they showed off some really interesting games, and they also showed off some pretty interesting kind of direction, I guess, with where they're going. You know, for instance, they had quite a focus on indie developers. They showed off eight indie games during their conference, all of which looked pretty interesting. In particular, the Squid Man one, which I've never seen before, but looks hilarious. Sort of, it kind of reminds me a bit of Surgeon Simulator in terms of, I don't know if it's just the way that the character moves, that it's kind of a little disjointed and it's a bit tricky to move around, but that looks like a bit of fun. But also, you know, your big blockbuster titles, for instance, Bungie's new game, Destiny, that got a really long sort of preview during the PlayStation conference, and my word, does that look gorgeous. Now, it might just be me, actually, in terms of, obviously, you know, new consoles. Of course, it's going to look shiny to what we currently have. You know, the Xbox, the PlayStation are 8 and 7 years old. They're not young, sprightly pieces of hardware. So, you know, current, if you will, generation PC graphics, etc., on a console are going to look good. And actually, to be fair, by the time the consoles come out, actually, they're probably going to be a little dated. But at the end of the day, I think what the general feel for me of the whole conferences and what has been announced and talked about is that as gamers we are going to have a really amazing time this year in terms of new hardware, new software, and all in all I think the real people who are going to benefit here are the gamers at the end of the day. I am happy that Microsoft had a really good conference because fundamentally I think that they have been able to confirm that, you know, they are in it for the gamer as well. I am personally much happier with a two kind of party system, as it were. You know, So there is some competition to make sure that each Sony PlayStation manufacturer, they have to push themselves to produce the best experience possible. And of course, given that, it means that innovation, new interesting IP, etc. are produced, and all in all, that means that us, the end gamer, we get more options, better prices, better systems out of it. And I'm glad that Microsoft seems to have picked their game up a little bit. Now, definitely, if you had to call a winner of the whole lot, I'd definitely personally say it's going to be close between EA and Sony. I think they both had sterling conferences. And it's going to prove it's going to be interesting come release day. Of course, both have rough time periods. Microsoft's is a bit more precise than Sony's, but it's going to be interesting to see how well these consoles sell, and it's going to be interesting to see in terms of the percentages which one outsells the other in the initial kind of go. So all in all, E3, the conferences done by EA, Ubisoft, Sony and Microsoft, I think they delivered, they really did, in terms of things we were expecting, some things we weren't, and just all in all showing off what we can all look forward to this console generation. It's awesome to see that with new hardware, more hardware, that the developers, the guys who make these games for us to play, have more and more resource to actually go away and produce the worlds, the experiences that they want to. And it is really, really refreshing to see not only our old favourites being prevalent, the likes of, say, Battlefield or Call of Duty or Halo, whatever the case may be, but also some new interesting games coming along as well to help supplement that. So, all in all, E3 for me has been pretty damn awesome, and I'm pleased that I was one of the crazy ones here in the UK to stay up until 4 o'clock in the morning to watch it all, but it was so worth it, and I think we are set really brilliantly for the next generation of consoles, and of course the next generation console war to kick off. And, well, we've got some pretty amazing titles to back up the launch, so that's great. So I think with that pretty much wraps up, if you will, day one of E3. I'm keeping an eye on the news and things are bound to change, of course, but I would love to know what you thought of what has been released and talked about at this year's E3. Please do feel free to share that with everyone down in the comment section below, and I'll try and reply to as much as I can there. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed what I've talked about, this brief kind of recap and impressions of E3 this year. As I mentioned, if you have anything you'd like to share or discuss, please do feel free to leave it down in the comment section below. If you could leave a like, dislike, whatever you believe this video deserves, that'd be fantastic. And if you're new to my videos and you want to see some more content from myself, you can always subscribe. But guys, thank you so very much for watching. I've been Chuggy, and I'll see you next time out on the battlefield.